He left her to save her life. But 5 years later, one call shattered everything. Patrick, they have our son. Now a ruthless mafia boss must face the ghosts of his past, the woman he still loves, and the enemies waiting in the shadows. But when love becomes a battlefield, who will make it out alive? The city slept under a blanket of cold rain, its streets glistening like rivers of silver under flickering streetlights. In a penthouse that touched the clouds, Patrick Leone sat in silence, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. The faint hum of thunder rolled across the skyline, but it wasn't the storm that kept him awake. It was the weight of choices made years ago, the ghosts that still whispered in his mind. He had built an empire from fear, power, and control. But none of it could quiet the hollowness that had settled in his chest since the day Sarah walked out of his life, or rather, the day he let her go. When the phone rang at 2:11 a.m., the sound cut through the stillness like a blade. Patrick frowned, his instincts tightening. No one dared to call him at that hour unless it was life or death. He hesitated for half a heartbeat, staring at the glowing screen before answering. "Leone," he said, his tone sharp, cold, and commanding. But the voice on the other end wasn't what he expected. It wasn't one of his men, nor an enemy delivering threats. It was soft, trembling, feminine. "Sir," the voice quavered, "this is Nurse Ella from St. Helena's Hospital. I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a baby here registered under your name." Patrick's grip on the phone tightened. "What?" His voice came out lower, darker. The nurse hesitated, then whispered, "And the mother's name listed is Sarah." The sound of that name, her name, sent a shock through his chest like a gunshot. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. Sarah. 5 years. 5 long years since he had seen her face, since he had turned his back on the one woman who had made him forget who he was. And remember who he could have been. He had buried that memory like a dead man buries his heart, deep beneath power, violence, and silence. But tonight, it rose from the grave. He stood knocking over the glass on the table. It shattered, spilling whiskey like blood across the marble floor. The nurse was still speaking, her words blurring. Something about the baby, about the records, about how she'd found his private number. But Patrick wasn't listening anymore. His mind was spinning. A baby? Her name? Registered under mine? It couldn't be possible, and yet it felt too cruel to be anything else. "Send me the address," he snapped. Within seconds, he was already pulling on his coat, the phone pressed between his shoulder and ear. "Yes, sir," the nurse stammered. "St. Helena's Hospital, room 14B. Patrick didn't even hang up properly. The line went dead as he strode through the rain, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The elevator doors opened with a chime that sounded too cheerful for the moment. His reflection in the metal walls stared back at him, a man with sharp edges, eyes that had seen too much, but right now, filled with something almost foreign, fear. Outside, the storm had grown heavier. Raindrops hammered the windshield as he started the engine, the roar of his black Maserati slicing through the night. He pressed harder on the accelerator, each second stretching longer than it should. The city blurred past, empty streets, neon signs, and the occasional flash of headlights. His thoughts were a battlefield. Could Sarah really have come back? Why would her name be on a hospital record under his? And a baby registered as Leone. Every red light felt like a curse. He slammed the steering wheel, jaw clenched. "Damn it, Sarah," he muttered. "What did you do?" The hospital came into view. A tall, sterile building washed in cold white light. Patrick pulled up to the curb, not even bothering to park properly. He pushed through the glass doors, his soaked shoes squeaking against the polished floor. The smell of antiseptic filled his lungs, sharp and clean, the opposite of everything his world had ever been. Nurses looked up, startled by his sudden presence. Even in a soaked coat and shadowed eyes, his aura of authority made them step aside without a word. "I'm here for the baby," he said flatly. The receptionist stammered, flipping through papers. "Nen name, sir?" "Patrick Leone." The air seemed to shift at the weight of it. Everyone knew that name, whispered it like a legend or a warning. She nodded quickly and called the nurse who had spoken to him earlier. Within moments, Nurse Ella appeared, small, nervous, clutching a clipboard. "Mr. Leone, thank you for coming," she said softly. "Follow me." Her shoes clicked against the floor as she led him down a quiet corridor, past dim lights and the soft beeping of monitors. Patrick walked behind her, his pulse echoing in his ears. They stopped at a door marked Nursery, Private Ward. The nurse paused, hand on the handle. "Before you go in," she came alone, the mother. "She didn't stay long. Patrick raised a hand, silencing her. "Open it." The door creaked open, and the world seemed to stop. Inside, beneath the gentle glow of the overhead light, lay a small crib. Patrick stepped closer, his shoes making almost no sound. His breath caught as he saw the baby. Tiny, sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling with slow, perfect rhythm. The innocence of it struck Patrick harder than a bullet ever had. He stared for what felt like forever, unable to move. The baby had dark hair, his dark hair, and the faintest shadow of a frown on his face, the same stubborn expression Patrick often wore when the world dared to challenge him. His throat tightened. He reached for the small tag hanging from the crib's corner. Adam Leone, 7 months old. Patrick's heart twisted painfully. Adam. The name echoed through him like a forgotten melody. Nurse Ella stepped closer. She said you'd come." Patrick's head snapped toward her. "She?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion he didn't want her to hear. "Sarah," the nurse whispered. She was pale, frightened. "She said she couldn't stay, but she begged us to keep the baby safe, and she left this for you." In her trembling hands was a folded letter, sealed with a lipstick mark, faint but unmistakable. Patrick's breath hitched. He recognized that color, that shape. He had kissed those lips, memorized that curve. His fingers trembled as he took it from her. For a long moment, he simply stared at the envelope, his pulse thundering. The nurse hesitated. "She didn't say where she was going, just that you'd understand." Patrick's jaw flexed. "Did she look hurt?" "No," the nurse said softly, "but she looked like she'd already said goodbye." Patrick turned back to the baby. The soft hum of the machines filled the silence. His world, a world built on control, violence, and precision, suddenly felt fragile, like one wrong breath could shatter it all. He brushed his finger against the baby's tiny hand. The child's grip tightened instinctively around his finger, and Patrick felt something he hadn't felt in years. Warmth. Life. Hope. He swallowed hard, fighting the emotion that burned in his chest. "Adam," he whispered, "what have you done to me, Sarah?" A faint thunder rumbled outside, as if the night itself was listening. He looked down at the letter again. The lipstick mark smudged by raindrops from his hand. He wanted to open it, but something stopped him. Fear. Not of what it said, but of what it would mean. He could almost hear her voice in his head, soft and trembling. "Patrick, please don't come for me." But he had already come. He was already too far gone. Nurse Ella spoke quietly. "Would you like to hold him?" Patrick hesitated. His hands, the same hands that had pulled triggers, built empires, ended lives, didn't seem worthy. But when she carefully lifted the baby and placed him into his arms, the world changed. The warmth of that small body, the tiny heartbeat against his chest, undid every wall he'd built. He looked down at Adam, who stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open for the briefest moment. A flash of hazel that mirrored Sarah's. It was like looking into the past, and the future all at once. Patrick's throat tightened as he whispered, "Hey there, little one." The words came out rough, foreign, but real. The baby yawned softly, a sound so innocent that it broke something inside him. He sat down in the chair beside the crib, still holding Adam close. The hospital light flickered once, casting shadows that danced across the room. His mind spiraled. Why now? Why like this? Where was she? Who was behind this? Then his gaze fell once more to the envelope resting on the table beside the crib. The faint lipstick seal glimmered under the dim light, daring him to open it. Patrick reached for it slowly, his fingers trembling. His breath was shallow, each heartbeat louder than the last. The moment stretched, suspended between fear and truth. He tore it open, the paper crackling in the silence. Inside was a single sheet, her handwriting unmistakable, elegant, desperate, trembling. He read the words, each one slicing through him like glass. "Protect him. He's ours. Don't look for me." The world seemed to tilt. His vision blurred, and for the first time in years, Patrick Leone, the man who had conquered cities, who feared nothing, felt his soul break. He looked at the baby again, his son, and knew that whatever nightmare had begun tonight was only the beginning. Somewhere outside, in the dark corners of the rain-soaked city, a pair of eyes watched from a car across the street. The figure lit a cigarette, exhaled smoke into the night, and murmured, "He found the kid, phase 1 complete." And just like that, the storm wasn't the only thing coming for Patrick Leone. The cigarette smoke outside the hospital window had long since faded into the rain, but inside Patrick Leone's chest, the fire only grew. He stood where the storm had left him, silent, rigid, eyes locked on the folded note that had just rewritten the meaning of his existence. "Protect him, he's ours. Don't look for me." The words burned through his skull, searing deep into the hollow that had replaced his heart years ago. For a man who had built his empire on control, every letter felt like a chain breaking. He was supposed to be untouchable, untamed. Yet now, a single sentence written in her trembling hand had brought him to his knees. Adam stirred in the crib, a soft cooing sound pulling Patrick from his trance. He turned slowly, his gaze softening despite the storm raging behind his eyes. The baby shifted, a small hand twitching in sleep, and for a heartbeat Patrick forgot the darkness that owned him. He crouched beside the crib, fingers brushing against the edge of the blanket, his voice barely a whisper. "You're real," he said, disbelief breaking through his tone. "You're mine." The words trembled, foreign and fragile, like they didn't belong to a man like him. But they did now. Whether he wanted it or not, the truth had taken root. Nurse Ella stood near the door, hesitant. "Mr. Leone." She was terrified, she murmured softly. Sarah kept looking over her shoulder like someone might follow her. She wouldn't tell us who. She just said she couldn't stay. Patrick rose slowly, turning toward her. His eyes had changed. They were no longer the eyes of a man caught off guard. They were sharp again, dangerous. Did she say anything else? Anything about who might have been after her? The nurse shook her head, her fingers tightening around her clipboard. "No, sir, but she left fast, like she knew time was running out." That single phrase pierced deeper than she knew. Time was running out. Patrick's jaw clenched. The nurse looked frightened now, sensing the storm behind his calm. He exhaled slowly, forcing control back into his tone. "You did good," he said, voice low. "Take care of him until I come back." The nurse frowned, confused. "Come back? But where are you going?" Patrick didn't answer. His eyes were on the letter again. The faint lipstick mark now looked like a stain of blood. "To find her," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He stepped out of the room without another word, his footsteps echoing through the sterile hallway. The hum of machines faded behind him, replaced by the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Every shadow in the corridor seemed alive, whispering her name, Sarah. The woman who'd once been his light, now swallowed by darkness he thought he'd buried. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city drenched in silence. The air smelled of wet concrete and something electric. Change. Patrick lit a cigarette, his hand steady though his pulse wasn't. The first drag burned his lungs, grounding him. The note crinkled in his other hand, the edges soaked from where his grip had tightened too hard. A figure moved near the parking lot, a silhouette watching him from behind the fogged glass doors. Patrick's instincts flared instantly. His hand slipped to the gun beneath his coat, but when the figure turned, it was only a janitor. Still, his nerves stayed razor sharp. Old habits never died, not in his world. He reached his car, the Maserati still glistening under the hospital lights. When he opened the door, the scent of rain mixed with leather and gun oil greeted him. He sat behind the wheel, staring through the windshield as drops of water traced crooked paths down the glass. For the first time in years, he didn't know his next move. The man who once dictated wars now faced a war he didn't understand, one that involved innocence, not power. He took out the letter again, reading it under the glow of the dashboard. Protect him. That meant she was in danger. Don't look for me. That meant someone was watching. His mind sharpened, connecting invisible dots in the dark. Sarah hadn't left him out of fear of him. She'd left to protect something much bigger, and now someone wanted him to find her. He started the engine, the low growl filling the silence. The city unfolded ahead, endless streets filled with ghosts of his past. He drove without direction, letting instinct guide him. Every red light, every shadowed alley whispered possibilities. His phone buzzed once, breaking the quiet. Unknown number, no name, just one message glowing on the screen. She's alive. Come alone if you want her back. Patrick froze. His pulse spiked, his breath catching halfway through his chest. The cigarette fell from his lips. The world outside blurred as adrenaline surged through him. Someone knew. Someone was playing him. He typed nothing, just stared at the words like they were bait. He parked beneath a flickering street lamp and read the message again. The phrasing was deliberate. Come alone. Whoever sent it knew exactly who they were dealing with. This wasn't random. This was personal. He checked the timestamp. 2 minutes ago. Whoever it was, they were close. A car passed slowly down the street, headlights cutting across his windshield. For a split second, Patrick thought he saw movement in the back seat, a flash of a woman's silhouette, long hair, fragile shoulders. Sarah? He stepped out into the cold night, gun ready. But the car sped away into the darkness, leaving only the echo of tires on wet asphalt. He cursed under his breath, shoving the phone back into his pocket. His reflection in the side mirror looked like a stranger. Eyes too tired, heart too raw. He wasn't used to chasing ghosts, but for Sarah, he would burn the world again. He drove back toward his penthouse, the skyline glowing like embers against the black sky. Inside, the city was sleeping, but his war had just begun. He walked into his office, the scent of whiskey and smoke still lingering from earlier. The shattered glass on the floor reminded him of the moment everything changed. He picked up a shard, staring at his distorted reflection. You thought you could outrun it, he muttered to himself, but she was never gone. He sat at his desk and opened the drawer where he kept the untraceable phone, the one only a handful of people knew existed. His thumb hovered over a number he hadn't dialed in years. Ethan, Sarah's brother, the man who hated him more than anyone alive. But before he could press call, his main phone vibrated again. Another message appeared, this time a photo. Patrick's heart stopped. It was Sarah. Her face pale, eyes wide, bound hands barely visible in the shadows. The background was dark, unrecognizable. A warehouse, maybe, or a basement. And beneath the image, 3 words that made his blood run cold. Tick-tock, Leon. He gritted his teeth, rage crawling up his spine. Someone was taunting him, daring him to move. The phone buzzed once more before he could respond. Another blocked number, another text. "You've got 1 hour. Don't bring your men." A faint sound came from the hallway outside his penthouse, a creak of the door hinge, followed by silence. Patrick moved without thinking, gun drawn, every sense alert. He stepped into the hallway, but it was empty. Only the storm's fading echo filled the air. Then, on the floor near the elevator, he saw it. A small envelope, identical to the one Sarah had left at the hospital. He bent down slowly, picking it up. Inside, another note. Same handwriting. "If you ever want to see me again, follow the trail." No signature. Just a faint perfume. Hers. Patrick exhaled shakily, folding the letter. His pulse pounded so hard it drowned out everything else. Someone had turned his life into a game, and Sarah was the prize. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the man they were playing with. He holstered his gun, eyes burning with cold determination. The Mafia boss inside him had returned, sharper than ever. "You wanted me alone," he whispered into the night. "You got it." As he stepped into the elevator, the doors slid shut, cutting through the dim light like a blade. Somewhere out there, Sarah was alive, scared, waiting. And somewhere closer, someone was watching, smiling in the dark, knowing Patrick Leone had just taken the bait. The elevator descended, each floor marker ticking like a countdown. The hum of the city grew louder, more dangerous. He gripped the envelope tightly, his mind already mapping the next move. The hunter had been provoked, and this time, there would be no mercy. Patrick clenched his jaw, his eyes burning. Whoever took her had just signed their death sentence. 3. The elevator doors slid open into the heart of the sleeping city, spilling Patrick into the humid night. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the air still tasted like electricity, heavy with something waiting to break. He walked to his car without hesitation, his coat trailing behind him like a shadow. The note in his hand, Sarah's scent still clinging to it, burned like a brand against his skin. Follow the trail. That was all he had. No address, no clue, just a direction. His instincts screamed he already knew. The docks. The thought struck him as he gripped the steering wheel. Of all the places in this city, that was where his story began, and where it had nearly ended once. He didn't question it. He didn't need to. Some ghosts don't have to speak. They just wait where you left them. He started the engine, the low growl of the Maserati merging with the hum of the city that never truly slept. As he drove through the empty streets, the world outside felt unreal. Flickering neon reflected off puddles, the occasional flash of a police siren somewhere far away. But inside his head, everything was painfully sharp. Sarah's face, her voice, the baby's tiny hands, and now the message that refused to leave his mind. She's alive. Come alone. The closer he got to the waterfront, the colder the air became. The scent of salt, rust, and oil filled his lungs. The dock stretched ahead, cranes like metal skeletons reaching into the fog. Every sound echoed too loud. Every step felt like walking into the mouth of something that had been waiting years to swallow him whole. A shadow moved between two containers. Patrick stopped. His hand slipped inside his coat, fingers brushing the cool steel of his pistol. Silence. Then, a metallic clang, somewhere to his right. He turned, gun raised, eyes scanning the fog. "If you're going to kill me," he muttered, "be man enough to show your face." A laugh answered him, low, familiar, and venomous. "Still dramatic as ever, boss." Patrick froze. That voice was one he hadn't heard in half a decade, a ghost, walking. From the mist stepped Marco, the same Marco who had once stood at Patrick's side through wars, who had sworn loyalty to the Leone family until the day he vanished, presumed dead, after betraying him. But there he was now, alive, older, the smirk on his face cutting through the fog like a knife. "Marco," Patrick breathed, his voice low and lethal. "You're supposed to be dead." Marco chuckled, lighting a cigarette with a flick of his lighter. "Yeah, I get that a lot lately." He exhaled smoke, the ember glow flashing across the scars on his face. "Guess Death and I came to an understanding." Patrick's grip on the gun tightened. His instinct screamed to pull the trigger, to end this unfinished business once and for all. "Where is she?" he asked, voice a dangerous calm. Marco tilted his head, eyes glinting. "Straight to the point. That's what I always liked about you, boss." The word boss came out mockingly, as if he was tasting poison. "But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You'll see her when the time's right." Patrick took a slow step forward, the sound of his boots crunching against the wet gravel. "Don't play with me, Marco. You know how this ends." "Do I?" Marco asked, grinning. "Because last I checked, you walked away from her. You walked away from everything. And now you come running back, all righteous, all broken." He laughed again, a harsh sound that echoed against the cargo containers. "You should be smarter, Patrick. Sarah's alive because we want you alive." The words sliced deeper than any blade could. We want you alive. That meant more people were involved. More than Marco. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a message. Patrick's voice dropped lower, colder. "Who's we?" Marco shrugged, smoke curling around his face. "You'll find out soon enough, but you're not going to like it." The sound of footsteps echoed behind Patrick. He spun instantly, gun raised, but there was nothing. Just fog. When he turned back, Marco had moved closer, close enough that Patrick could see the faint tremor in his hands. "Still quick," Marco said with a smirk, "but not quick enough to see what's coming." Patrick's patience snapped. He pressed the barrel of his gun to Marco's chest. "Tell me where she is." Marco didn't flinch. "You think that'll help? You kill me, and she dies tonight." The words hit like a sledgehammer. The hand holding the gun trembled just enough for Marco to notice. He grinned wider, feeding on it. "Yeah, I thought so." Patrick's mind raced. He couldn't risk Sarah's life, but every second he wasted talking was another second she was in danger. "What do you want?" he growled. Marco exhaled smoke, flicking ash into the sea. "Let's call it what it is. Debt collection. You owe people, Patrick, and debts like yours don't disappear just because you hide behind fancy suits and penthouses." "I paid every debt I ever owed," Patrick snarled. "Not this one," Marco said softly, eyes glinting. "This one's written in blood, hers and yours." Patrick's world narrowed. "You touch her and You'll what?" Marco cut in sharply, stepping closer until the barrel of the gun pressed against his chest. "Shoot me. Go ahead, do it, end me. But the second you do, her heart stops. We wired it that way." Patrick froze. His mind caught on the word wired. "What did you say?" Marco smirked. "You heard me. She's got something we need. And so do you. You'll know when you pay what's owed." The fog swirled thicker around them, the sea churning below like it knew the sins floating above it. Marco reached into his coat slowly, deliberately. Patrick tensed, finger tightening on the trigger. "Easy, boss," Marco said. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be bleeding." He pulled out a small flash drive, black, unmarked, and tossed it at Patrick's feet. It clattered against the dock, gleaming faintly in the dim light. "Everything you need is on that," Marco said, his grin twisting darker. "Tick-tock, boss." Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn bellowed through the fog, long and mournful. When Patrick looked up again, Marco was gone. Only the faint curl of cigarette smoke lingered where he'd stood. Patrick bent down slowly, picking up the flash drive. It felt heavier than it should, as if the weight of his past was trapped inside that tiny piece of plastic. He turned it over in his palm, his jaw tight. The last time he'd stood here, he'd made a promise to Sarah that she'd be safe. He'd failed her then. He wouldn't fail her now. The memory hit him like a wave. The night 5 years ago when the docks burned, when he told her to leave, when he swore it was the only way to keep her alive. Her tears had mixed with the rain as she whispered, "Don't let this world kill you, Patrick." And he hadn't. But it had killed something else inside him. He looked out over the dark water, the city lights shimmering in the distance. The flash drive sat in his palm like a key to a door he never wanted to open. Whatever was inside it, names, secrets, blood, would lead him straight into the fire again. But this time, he wasn't walking in alone. He slid the flash drive into his pocket, turning toward the car. The fog shifted, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement. A woman's silhouette at the edge of the pier, watching him. His breath caught. "Sarah?" he whispered. But when he blinked, the figure was gone. Only the echo of the sea remained. Patrick clenched his jaw, the wind tugging at his coat. Every instinct screamed that the past wasn't done with him. It had just started hunting again. He started the engine, the roar cutting through the silence like a promise. He didn't know what truth lay inside that flash drive. But somewhere deep down, beneath the rage and the fear, he knew one thing. Whatever was coming, it wasn't just about Sarah. It was about everything he'd buried, every ghost he'd left behind. And ghosts, he'd just learned, have a way of finding you when you least expect it. Patrick picked up the flash drive, not realizing it held the truth he'd been running from for years. 4. Patrick sat in the car, the flash drive heavy in his palm, the city lights reflected in his eyes like fractured pieces of memory. The fog still clung to the windshield, ghosting over his reflection, making it hard to tell where the past ended and the present began. He turned the drive over once more, feeling its cold edges, then slipped it into his jacket pocket. He didn't know what truth it carried, but he knew it wasn't going to be mercy. When he finally pulled up the long, winding road to his mansion, the iron gates opened with their usual groan, the sound that had once meant safety, now only a reminder of isolation. The guards saluted, but he barely saw them. His mind was miles away. Trapped between the echo of Sarah's voice and Marco's words, inside, the house was silent except for the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock, the one Sarah used to tease him about, saying it sounded like time refusing to die. Every corner still smelled faintly of her. Jasmine, coffee, and rain. It made his chest ache. He moved straight to his study, closing the door behind him. The room was dimly lit by the flicker of the fireplace. On the desk sat his laptop, waiting. Patrick hesitated for a long moment before sitting down. His thumb brushed over the flash drive one last time before he slid it into the port. The screen flickered, then came alive, at first only static. Then a shaky image came into focus. Sarah. She was sitting somewhere dimly lit, a blanket draped over her shoulders. In her arms, a baby, Adam, his son. Patrick froze. He couldn't breathe. Sarah's hair was longer now, slightly disheveled, but her eyes, those eyes he'd tried to forget, were as soft and bright as the day he first fell in love with her. "Patrick," she whispered, her voice trembling but strong, "if you're watching this, it means they found me." His chest tightened. The words were daggers. She looked down at the baby, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I came back because I couldn't live without seeing you again. But they're close. Don't look for me. Just love him enough for both of us." Patrick leaned closer to the screen, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "Sarah," he whispered, reaching for her through the screen as if he could pull her back. The video shook violently, a door slamming in the background. Sarah's head jerked up, fear flashing across her face. "No, no." "Please," she cried, clutching Adam closer. Shadows burst into the frame, men in black, shouting. One grabbed her arm. She screamed, "Patrick!" And the feed cut to black. For a moment, the silence in the room was unbearable. Then the laptop whirred. Another file began to play automatically. It wasn't video this time. It was audio. A deep voice said, "She's alive, but for how long depends on you." Patrick slammed his fist on the desk, sending papers flying. The firelight painted his face in violent shades of red and gold. His veins pulsed with fury, guilt, and something deeper. The old fire that had once made him a legend in this city's underworld. He'd buried it for her, but now it clawed its way out of his chest like a beast starved for years. He stood and paced, his mind spinning. The video meant Sarah had known this was coming. She hadn't been running aimlessly. She was protecting him, protecting their son. Every decision she made had been to shield them from the storm that was now at his doorstep. The memory of the night she'd reappeared just a year ago hit him like thunder. He'd thought it was a dream then. She had shown up at his door, rain-soaked and trembling, whispering his name like a prayer. He had pulled her into his arms, thinking time had finally forgiven them. But now, watching that video, he realized that night had been her goodbye. Patrick sank into his chair, the world tilting around him. He remembered every detail of that night. The scent of her hair, the way her hand rested against his chest, the tremor in her voice when she said, "Don't ever stop looking at me like this, Patrick." He hadn't known it was the last time he'd see her. The pain hit like a hammer, relentless. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "You came back," he murmured, voice cracking. "You came back for me." The laptop pinged softly. Another folder appeared, labeled "For Him." Patrick clicked it open. Inside was a short clip of Sarah again, holding Adam, smiling faintly through tears. "Tell him stories, Patrick," she said softly. "Tell him about us. Not who we were, but who we wanted to be." Her voice trembled, but her eyes held a quiet defiance. "Promise me you'll keep him safe." Patrick's vision blurred. He whispered, "I promise." Then the clip flickered and a distorted image appeared. A hand placing something beside Sarah, a small metallic device blinking red, a tracker. Patrick's blood ran cold. Someone had been watching her even while she recorded the message. He pushed back from the desk, the chair screeching across the floor. "No," he growled, pacing again. "No, no, no." The realization hit like a storm. They hadn't just found her. They had always known where she was, which meant they knew about Adam, too. He slammed his palm against the wall, fury trembling through his frame. His reflection in the window stared back. A man caught between the person he used to be and the one he was trying to become. "You wanted a monster," he muttered, voice low and shaking. "You're about to get one." The clock ticked louder. The fire hissed. Somewhere deep in the house, Adam stirred in his sleep, as if sensing the storm in his father's chest. Patrick walked to the window, looking out over the city, the empire he'd built, the kingdom of steel and blood that had cost him everything. His breath fogged the glass as he whispered, "I'm coming for you, Sarah." Then a floorboard creaked behind him. His hand moved instinctively toward the gun on his desk. He turned sharply, muscles coiled for violence. The room was empty, but the faintest scent of jasmine drifted through the air, her perfume. He frowned, scanning the shadows. "Who's there?" Silence. Only the crackle of the fire. He exhaled slowly, running a hand across his face. He was losing his grip. Too many ghosts, too many lies. He turned back to the desk, replaying the video one last time, committing her voice to memory. That's when he heard it. Soft footsteps. Closer this time. A reflection flickered in the glass. Not a ghost. A person. He spun, gun drawn, only to freeze in shock. Standing in the doorway, bathed in the dim orange light, was a woman. But not Sarah. Her hair was streaked with silver, her presence commanding, her eyes sharp with unspoken warning. "Mother," Patrick breathed. She stepped forward. her gaze falling to the laptop screen still showing Sarah's frozen face. "You opened it," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Patrick's voice was rough. "You knew?" Her expression didn't waver. "I always knew." He felt the ground shift beneath him. "You knew she was alive, that she—" "Stop!" His mother cut in sharply, her tone like steel. "If you go after her again, you'll lose everything." Her voice was calm, but her eyes, his mother's eyes, were full of something that chilled him deeper than fear. From behind him, a familiar voice whispered, "If you go after her again, you'll lose everything." It was his mother, the only one who knew how much Sarah still owned his soul. Patrick didn't listen. He couldn't. His mother's words still echoed in his head. "If you go after her again, you'll lose everything." But that warning only fed the fire that was already tearing through him. Lose everything? He already had. The moment Sarah's face disappeared into darkness on that screen, the world had stopped meaning anything else. Sleep never came that night. He spent the hours pacing the mansion's corridors, every tick of the clock gnawing at his resolve. At dawn, when the city outside was just beginning to breathe, Patrick stood before the mirror. The reflection that stared back wasn't the man Sarah once loved. It was the man he used to be, the one she begged him to bury, the one built for war. By the time the first light touched the skyline, his jet was ready. He didn't pack much, just his gun, the flash drive, and a photograph of Sarah holding baby Adam. As the engines roared to life, he whispered under his breath, "Hold on, Sarah. I'm coming." The flight to Sicily felt endless. Each passing cloud reminded him of promises broken, words left unsaid. He kept replaying her message in his mind. "Don't look for me. Just love him enough for both of us." But Patrick knew that wasn't possible. Loving Adam without her felt like trying to breathe underwater. The more he tried to stay calm, the more his rage clawed to the surface. When the plane finally landed, the air was warm and heavy with sea salt. Sicily, the place where it all began. The streets were just as he remembered, narrow cobblestone veins that bled history. It was here he and Sarah had once walked hand in hand, before everything fell apart. It was here he learned what love felt like, and what losing it could do to a man. As Patrick stepped out of the car near the old harbor, a familiar sound reached him, the tolling of a church bell. It echoed through the narrow alleys like a warning from another life. He followed the coordinates Marco had given indirectly through the flash drive. They led him not to a warehouse or safe house, but to a small seaside cafe perched on the edge of the cliffs. It was almost peaceful. Almost. Patrick's instincts told him peace didn't belong to men like him anymore. Inside, the cafe was quiet. Morning light filtered through cracked shutters, dust dancing in the air like ghosts. And there, sitting alone with a cup of black coffee, was Ethan, Sarah's brother. The last time Patrick had seen him, Ethan had threatened to kill him if he ever came near his sister again. Ethan looked older now, his face carved by grief and sleepless nights. His knuckles were bruised, his eyes hollow. Yet when he looked up and saw Patrick, a flicker of something, maybe hate, maybe relief, crossed his face. "You've got a nerve coming here," he said, voice low but edged with venom. Patrick sat across from him without invitation. "Where is she?" Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "You don't change, do you? Always straight to the kill." Patrick's jaw tightened. "I didn't come here to fight." "Good," Ethan said, swirling his coffee, "because I buried my weapons long ago." His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Unlike you, I learned to live without blood." Patrick leaned forward, his eyes burning into him. "She's in danger. You know where she is." Ethan's expression faltered for a heartbeat, then hardened again. "You destroyed her once. Don't destroy what's left." The tension between them was thick enough to choke on. The sound of a distant wave crashing against the rocks filled the silence like a countdown. Patrick slammed his fist on the table, the cups rattling. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice low but shaking with restrained fury. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he reached inside his jacket. For a moment, Patrick's instinct screamed that a gun was coming. But instead, Ethan pulled out an envelope. He pushed it across the table slowly, like it weighed 100 pounds. "This is all I have," he said. Patrick tore it open. Inside were a few grainy photographs, a folded piece of paper, and a single USB drive. The first photo made his blood run cold. Sarah, bound to a chair, her wrists bruised, her eyes wide but defiant. Fear lived in her face, but beneath it burned the same fire that had once set his world ablaze. Patrick's hand shook as he looked up. Where did this come from? Ethan's voice broke. "They sent it to me. A warning. Said if I ever tried to help her, she'd die." He took a deep breath, his gaze dropping. "She still loves you, Patrick. That's why she's suffering. She went back because she wanted Adam to know his father, even if it cost her everything." Patrick swallowed hard, the photo trembling in his grip. "She came back for me," he whispered half to himself. Ethan nodded slowly. "And she's paying for it now." Outside, thunder rolled over the sea, though the sky was clear. Patrick knew that sound wasn't nature. It was something else. Trouble. He stood, the chair scraping harshly against the tile. "I'm going to find her." Ethan rose too, his face pale. "You think you can fix this with a gun and rage? You'll just get her killed." Patrick's gaze darkened. "I'll get her back or die trying." Ethan shook his head. "That's exactly what they want." Patrick's jaw clenched, his mind already running ahead. Maps, connections, enemies. He had contacts in Sicily still, men who owed him favors, men who could find anyone, anywhere. He turned to leave, but Ethan's hand shot out, gripping his arm. "If you go there, she lives. Only if you don't." Patrick froze, those words slicing through him like a knife. Slowly, he turned back. "What are you saying?" Ethan's eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. "They want you, Patrick. She's the bait. The moment they get what they want, the moment they have you, she goes free. That's the deal they offered me." Patrick's breath caught. "And you didn't take it?" Ethan shook his head. "She told me not to. She said you'd come for her, but she didn't want your blood on her hands." Patrick's throat burned. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The sound of waves crashing below filled the silence. A shadow flickered outside the cafe window, movement too fast to be a passerby. Patrick's instincts flared. Someone was watching them. He leaned closer to Ethan. "Who knows I'm here?" Ethan's silence was answer enough. Patrick's eyes narrowed. "You led them to me." "I didn't have a choice," Ethan whispered. "They said they'd kill her if I didn't cooperate." Patrick's gaze softened, not in forgiveness, but in understanding. "Get out of here, Ethan, now." Ethan hesitated. "They're already coming." Patrick turned toward the door just as the bell above it chimed. 2 men entered, suits, armed, pretending to blend in. Patrick's hand slid beneath the table, gripping the gun strapped to his thigh. "Stay down," he muttered. The first man approached, his voice calm but cold. "Mr. Leone, our employer requests your company." Patrick smirked. "You can tell your employer I don't do requests." The man's smile faded. "Then I'm afraid this gets messy." Before he could draw, Patrick moved, faster than thought. The table flipped, a gunshot split the air, and glass shattered as the cafe exploded into chaos. Ethan ducked behind the counter, shouting, "Patrick, go!" But Patrick didn't run. He took one down with a shot to the chest, another with a strike to the throat. The rest scattered, their cover blown. Patrick grabbed the envelope and sprinted out the back, the alleyway filled with the echo of his footsteps and the smell of gunpowder. Behind him, Ethan's voice echoed, desperate, final. If you go there, she lives. Only if you don't." Patrick didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. The hunt had begun, and there was no turning back now. Sarah was alive. And every drop of blood spilled from this point forward would lead him to her. The storm had come to Sicily, and this time, Patrick wasn't running from it. He was the storm. 6. Patrick didn't stop running until the sea disappeared behind him, and the dirt roads turned into winding paths that cut through endless rows of grapevines. The air smelled of earth and smoke, the kind of place where beauty hid blood. He knew this vineyard. It once belonged to a family loyal to his empire before they vanished into the same shadows that now waited for him. The night clung to him like a second skin as he moved through the fields, his footsteps silent, his breath steady despite the pounding of his heart. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of wood made his finger twitch near the trigger. He wasn't here for war, he was here for her. But in his world, love and violence had always shared the same language. The moon broke through the clouds, casting a silver path toward the old stone manor that crowned the hill. Patrick slowed, his senses sharpening. He could feel eyes on him, unseen, patient, waiting. The vineyard was too quiet, too perfect. The silence wasn't peace, it was the pause before chaos. His instinct screamed that this place was a trap, but he didn't care. He'd walked through worse for Sarah before, and he'd do it again 1,000 times. As he crept closer, a faint sound reached him, a muffled sob, soft but raw. His chest tightened. Sarah. The sound came from inside. He followed it through the cracked door, the scent of old wine and dust filling his lungs. The interior was dim, lit only by the flicker of a single hanging bulb that swayed gently, as if disturbed by a ghost. And then he saw her. Sarah sat tied to a chair in the center of the room, her hair tangled, her wrists bound, her lips trembling with exhaustion. Bruises marked her arms like cruel fingerprints, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that haunted him every night. For a heartbeat, Patrick couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to just her. "Sarah?" His voice came out as a whisper, cracked and desperate. Her head lifted slowly, disbelief flashing across her tear-streaked face. "Patrick?" The word broke her voice shaking as if afraid to believe what she was seeing. "Always," he breathed, stepping forward. His gun still raised as his other hand reached for her. She flinched at first, fear flickering before recognition took its place. He dropped the weapon to the floor and knelt, his knife slicing through the ropes that had bitten into her skin. "It's really you," she whispered, her voice catching between relief and heartbreak. He didn't answer. Couldn't. The moment their hands met, the world vanished. There was no vineyard, no danger, no blood waiting outside, just her, the woman he'd lost and the reason he was still breathing. Her fingers trembled as they brushed against his cheek, tracing the scar that hadn't been there when she last saw him. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. "You knew I would," he replied, pulling her close. But before the warmth could become peace, the world shattered again. Gunfire exploded from the shadows, sharp and merciless. The sound tore through the stillness like a scream. Patrick reacted instantly, pushing Sarah to the ground as splinters from the wooden beams burst into the air. "Stay down!" he shouted, his gun already back in his hand. Figures moved in the dark, Marco's men, dozens of them, encircling the room like wolves closing in on their prey. "Leone!" one of them yelled. "End of the line, boss!" Patrick gritted his teeth. He'd heard that line before, always from men who didn't live long enough to finish it. Bullets whizzed past him, punching holes through the walls and kicking up clouds of dust. He fired back, his shots precise, deadly. Each trigger pull was fueled by rage and love, two forces that had long become one in him. Sarah crawled behind a barrel, shielding her head as wood shattered around her. Patrick dove beside her, reloading with the speed of instinct. "How many?" she whispered. Enough to die trying, he muttered, eyes cold as steel, mini cliffhanger. A shadow loomed behind them, the barrel of a gun pressing against Patrick's back. Before the man could speak, Patrick twisted, grabbed the weapon, and slammed him into the wall. The man crumpled before he could even scream. Patrick's shoulder burned. A bullet had grazed him, but pain was a luxury he couldn't afford. He stood, firing again, clearing the room one target at a time. The walls shook, the air thick with smoke and fury. When the last man fell, the silence returned. Heavier, crueler. Patrick stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving, his shirt soaked in blood that wasn't all his own. Sarah crawled toward him, her hands shaking as they pressed against his wound. "You're hurt," she breathed, tears streaking down her face. "I've been worse," he said, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You're safe now." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it hurt. For a moment, the rest of the world didn't exist. Just the sound of their hearts beating, two survivors clinging to what little they had left. But then Sarah froze. Her body went rigid, her eyes widening with something far worse than fear. "No," she whispered. Patrick pulled back, confusion etched on his face. "What is it?" Her voice broke as she grabbed his collar, her nails digging into his skin. "Adam," she gasped. "They know where he is." The words slammed into him harder than any bullet. His mind blanked, every muscle locking in place. "What?" Sarah shook her head, her voice trembling. "They were never after me, Patrick. I was the bait. They wanted you away from him. They know where our son is." The room seemed to tilt, the world spinning out of focus. For the first time since this began, true terror flashed across Patrick's face. His jaw clenched, his pulse roaring in his ears. Outside, headlights appeared on the road leading to the vineyard. More cars, more men. The hunt wasn't over. It was just beginning again. Patrick looked down at Sarah, blood still dripping from his wound, fire still burning in his eyes. "Then we end this," he said, voice like thunder. "No matter who dies." Patrick's world detonated in an instant. Sarah's trembling words, "They know where our son is," were still echoing in his skull when instinct took over. He yanked her toward the exit, blood still seeping from his shoulder, his breath sharp and ragged. "We're leaving," he growled, his voice laced with panic and purpose. The rain had started again, heavy and relentless, soaking them as they ran through the shattered doors of the vineyard. Lightning ripped across the sky, flashing over the vineyards like the world itself was tearing apart. The car waited at the edge of the dirt road, engine still warm, headlights cutting through the storm. Patrick threw open the door, shoved Sarah inside, and slid behind the wheel. "Hold on," he said through clenched teeth. His hand slammed the ignition, and the tires screamed as the car shot forward, spitting mud and gravel behind them. The night blurred into streaks of black and silver, rain slashing across the windshield, thunder drowning out Sarah's sobs. Patrick's mind was a battlefield. Fragments of Sarah's video, Marco's voice, Adam's smile, all colliding inside him until there was nothing left but fury. He dialed the safe house number again, his blood running cold when only silence answered. Come on," he muttered, his jaw tightening. Then a faint sound, a click, a static whisper, and the line went dead. "They're already there," Sarah cried, her voice breaking. Patrick slammed his fist against the steering wheel, his pulse hammering. "They won't touch him," he snarled. "I swear to God they won't." The car's headlights suddenly caught movement, a shadow darting across the road. Patrick swerved, tires screeching, barely missing a black SUV speeding in the opposite direction. For a split second, he saw the insignia on its side, Marco's mark. His breath hitched. They were too late. But he refused to believe it. He pressed harder on the accelerator, the car flying down the highway, chasing ghosts and thunder. Hours bled together, the rain never stopping, the world outside a blur of lightning and wet asphalt. Sarah sat beside him, clutching Adam's blanket she had snatched before they fled the vineyard, her knuckles white, her lips trembling as silent prayers spilled between sobs. Patrick's eyes were locked on the road, his mind a storm of strategy and desperation. "They want me," he said finally, voice hollow. "That's all this is. They won't hurt him until I show up." Sarah turned to him, eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't go alone. I'll do whatever it takes," he cut her off. His tone left no room for argument. They made this personal. Now it's war. The rain thickened, drumming against the roof like gunfire. Every mile closer to the mansion made his chest tighter. He could almost hear Adam's laughter echoing through the halls, memories clawing at him, mocking him. You promised you'd protect him. By the time they reached the outskirts of the city, dawn was breaking through the clouds, weak and colorless. The mansion appeared on the horizon, once a symbol of power, now a silhouette of dread. The front gates hung open, one twisted off its hinges, the security lights flickering weakly. Patrick's breath hitched. "No," he whispered. The car screeched to a stop, gravel crunching beneath the tires. He jumped out before the engine even stopped, gun drawn, his boots splashing through puddles as he sprinted up the stone steps. "Stay behind me," he ordered, but Sarah followed, refusing to be left behind. The front doors were ajar, one hanging loosely from its frame. The scent of smoke and blood lingered in the air. Patrick stepped inside, each footfall echoing through the grand hallway. The silence was suffocating, the kind of quiet that followed violence. Furniture lay overturned, glass shattered, the faint hum of a broken light filling the void. He moved from room to room, gun raised, clearing each corner with mechanical precision. "Adam!" Sarah's voice cracked as she shouted his name, her desperation echoing off marble walls. No answer, only the creak of the house mourning what had been taken. A faint noise, a music box playing somewhere upstairs, drifted through the air. Patrick froze. It was Adam's lullaby. He followed the sound, his boots heavy on the staircase, his heart a drumbeat in his ears. The nursery door was open. The music box sat on the floor, spinning slowly, its delicate tune cutting through the tension like a knife. The crib, empty. A small blanket lay crumpled on the mattress, still warm. Sarah stumbled in behind him, her eyes wild, searching. When she saw the crib, her knees gave out. "No," she whispered, her voice shattering. "Patrick." She crawled toward the crib, clutching the tiny blanket to her chest. "They took him! They took our baby!" Her scream was pure pain, the sound of a heart tearing in half. Patrick stood motionless, staring at the emptiness before him, the world narrowing until all he could hear was the ticking of the clock and the ghost of Adam's laugh. Then something inside him broke. His gun slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor, his jaw locked, his breath shaking. When he spoke, his voice was low, hollow, and lethal. "They took my son," he said slowly, as if testing the words. Then his rage surfaced, violent, consuming. He swept his arm across the dresser, sending photos crashing to the floor. "They took my son!" he roared, the sound raw enough to shake the walls. Sarah sobbed behind him, her body trembling. Patrick turned toward her, his eyes blazing with something beyond anger, something primal. "I'm ending this tonight." He grabbed his phone, his blood-stained fingers dialing a number he'd sworn never to call again. The line clicked. A voice he hadn't heard since the docks. Marco's, calm, cruel. "I was wondering when you'd call," Marco said, his tone dripping with satisfaction. "You want him?" Patrick's grip tightened on the phone. "You want me?" he hissed. "You've got me." There was a long silence on the line. Then Marco's voice came back, smooth as poison. "Then come to where it all started," he said. "The docks." The line went dead. Patrick lowered the phone slowly, his pulse a thunderstorm beneath his skin. Sarah looked at him, terrified and desperate. "Patrick, don't." But his decision was already made. His eyes were cold, his movements mechanical as he reloaded his weapon and holstered it. "They wanted me," he said quietly, his voice almost calm. "Now they'll get me." He walked past her, pausing only for a moment to brush his hand against the doorframe, the last piece of home that still held a trace of Adam's laughter. Then he stepped into the rain, the mansion behind him burning in the reflection of the lightning. The night swallowed him whole, but the storm followed. The race against death had begun, and Patrick Leone was done running from it. He was running through it, straight toward the end. 8. The dawn was cold and cruel, the kind that carried ghosts in its breath. Patrick's car screeched to a halt near the docks, the tires cutting through puddles of oil and rain. The horizon was bruised gray. Waves crashing violently against the rotting wood, wind howling like a warning from hell itself. The place was exactly as he remembered, where he'd first met Sarah, where he'd once promised to protect her, and where everything had fallen apart. Now it was where everything would end. His coat whipped around him in the bitter wind as he stepped out, his boots sinking into wet gravel. The metallic tang of salt and blood hung in the air. In the distance, a shadow moved, Marco. He stood near the edge of the pier, his posture calm, deliberate, the faintest smile curling at his lips. And in his arms, baby Adam, bundled in a dark blanket, a tiny sound escaping him that sliced through Patrick's chest like a blade. Marco's gun gleamed in the pale light, its muzzle pressed to the child's chest. "You took everything from me once," Marco called out, voice echoing over the waves. "Now I'll take everything from you." Patrick didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Adam, on the faint rise and fall of his tiny chest. "You don't want this," he said, his voice hoarse, calm but trembling beneath the surface. Marco chuckled darkly. "I wanted peace. You ruined that when you betrayed me." Patrick's breath came in slow, heavy pulls. His mind raced, every angle, every possible shot. But one wrong move, and his son would die. He dropped his gun to the ground, the clatter loud in the quiet dawn. "Take me," he said. "Just let them go." Marco tilted his head, pretending to consider it, his smile never fading. "And let the legend of Patrick Leone live on?" he taunted. "No, you'll die, and so will she. Only the boy will live to hate your name." The words sliced deeper than any blade. Patrick's hands clenched at his sides, his pulse pounding so violently it hurt. But then, faint footsteps echoed behind him. Sarah. She was there, drenched, trembling, her eyes wide with fear and love. "Patrick, don't!" she screamed, her voice cracking like glass. He turned just enough to see her, hair plastered to her face, her clothes soaked through, her heart laid bare. "Go back, Sarah," he whispered. "Please." "I won't," she cried, shaking her head. "Not again, not without you." Marco laughed, raising his gun higher. "How poetic," he mocked. "A family reunion before the end." From somewhere above, a faint click echoed, a sound Patrick knew too well. A sniper, his breath caught. Marco's men were watching from the shadows, rifles trained on him. One wrong move, and all three would die. He lifted his hand slowly. "Let her come closer," Patrick said, voice steady. "You get me, but she takes the boy." Marco narrowed his eyes. "You think I'm a fool?" "No," Patrick said quietly, stepping forward inch by inch. "I think you're tired. You've lost too much already. End it with a little mercy." The wind hissed between them, waves crashing harder now, the storm threatening to return. Marco's jaw tightened. Hesitation flickered for just a second. Then it happened. A single crack split the air. A sniper shot, sharp, clean, merciless. Marco's body jerked backward, his eyes widening in shock. The gun fell from his hand, clattering to the pier before sliding into the dark sea below. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then Patrick ran. He reached Marco just as the man's body hit the ground, catching Adam before he could fall. The baby whimpered softly, blinking up at him with wide, confused eyes. Patrick's breath shattered. He pulled Adam to his chest, clutching him so tightly it hurt. "I've got you," he whispered, tears mixing with the rain. "You're safe now, little man. You're safe." Behind him, Sarah's sob broke through the air. She stumbled toward them, her knees giving way as she reached his side. Her hands trembled as she touched Adam's face, her sobs echoing through the crashing waves. "Patrick," she gasped, "I thought I lost you again." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw everything he had ever fought for. The pain, the love, the years stolen from them. He cupped her face in his trembling hands, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. "You'll never lose me again," he whispered, his voice raw. "I swear." Then he kissed her. It wasn't soft or perfect. It was desperate, broken, alive. A kiss that carried years of regret and forgiveness, of promises shattered and rebuilt in one heartbeat. The sun began to rise behind them, golden light spilling over the gray water. The docks, once soaked in blood and vengeance, now bathed in warmth. For the first time in years, Patrick felt something like peace. Sarah leaned her forehead against his, tears still slipping down her face. "It's over," she whispered. Patrick nodded, though deep inside he knew nothing was ever truly over. "Maybe," he murmured, "but right now, we're together. That's enough." He looked down at Adam, now quiet in his arms, the baby's tiny fingers clutching his shirt as if he too understood. Patrick smiled faintly, a rare, fragile thing. Sarah's hand slid into his, their fingers intertwining as the first full light of day washed over them. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The world was silent except for the waves and the soft cries of gulls circling above. Then, in that fragile peace, Sarah whispered, "He has your eyes." Patrick chuckled softly, his voice breaking. "Poor kid," he said, and she laughed through her tears. Behind them, the sea carried away the remnants of the night, Marco's gun, his blood, his empire. Everything that had chained them was gone, swallowed by the deep. A faint sound made Patrick turn. Footsteps on the pier, slow and deliberate. He reached for his weapon, but it was unnecessary. It was Ethan. He stood there, watching them with weary eyes. "You did it," he said quietly. "You actually did it." Patrick nodded once. Ethan's gaze softened as he looked at Sarah and the baby. "Take him far from here," he said. "Start over. Don't come back." Patrick met his eyes, an unspoken truce passing between them. Then Ethan turned and disappeared into the rising light, his figure fading like smoke. The wind picked up, gentle now, carrying away the last echoes of gunfire and grief. Patrick turned back to Sarah, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "Let's go home," he said. She smiled weakly. "Do we even have one left?" He looked toward the sunrise, the reflection painting the waves gold. "We'll build one," he said, "from nothing if we have to." They stood there for a while, holding each other, watching the sky shift from gray to gold. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a beginning. As the sun climbed higher, its warmth kissed their faces, drying their tears. Sarah rested her head against his shoulder, Adam asleep between them. "Do you think we'll ever be free?" she murmured. Patrick pressed a kiss to her hair. "Freedom isn't a place," he said softly. "It's the people you refuse to lose." She smiled through her exhaustion, her heart finally still. The storm was gone. The war was over. They had survived. Final line. Patrick looked out over the endless horizon, the sea whispering the ghosts of everything he'd done, everything he'd lost. He once left her to save her life. But this time, he chose to stay, even if it meant losing his soul. Because in the end, love wasn't about escaping the fire. It was about walking through it and coming out still holding the hand that mattered most. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Heartwoven Tales, where every story bleeds emotion and love fights against fate. Like, share, and press the bell icon so you never miss the next tale that will keep your heart racing till the very last word.